Thanks, Case. Before we begin, I'd love for us to do something together. In the chat, I invite you all to type one word that describes what brought you here today. Don't hit enter yet. We're going to all send our words together. You ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Wow. Thank you for indulging me. I wasn't sure this was going to go okay, but thank you so much. And looking at these words, so many, they're going so fast. I'm reminded words like togetherness, inclusivity, love, community, hope, education. These are the words that remind me why Gathering Ground exists and why we do the work that we do. We fervently believe that when people come together across differences with curiosity, with courage, with humility, and with the willingness to imagine something better, new possibilities emerge. For those of you who are new to Gathering Ground, welcome. We're especially glad you're here, and we hope this is the first of many programs you participate in. We have currently more than 80 people on this Zoom call. We had about 200 people registered, so we're hoping to get more in. And we have people joining us from communities across the country, and every one of you brings experiences, perspectives, and wisdoms that will help shape this conversation. So thank you for making time in your busy days to be here with us. What If Voices for Equity series is made possible with the support of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, the Stone Foundation of New Jersey, and the Grunin Foundation. We are truly grateful for their belief in this work and for making these sessions free and accessible to all. I want to also express a deep gratitude for our special guest and subject matter expert, Nathan Rodriguez. We'll be telling you a little bit more about Nathan in just a few minutes, but just a couple more acknowledgments and then I'll pass it over. I have to thank my fabulous team at Gathering Ground, their dedication, their passion. There's so much that happens behind the scenes, so thank you, and I'll allow each of them to introduce themselves.
So I'm Casey O'Brien. I'm the director of programming. I am a white woman in her 40s with red glasses. I'm wearing giant, like Princess Leia silver headphones. I've got a green jacket on and a purple shirt and some starting to be salt and pepper hair. So Maria, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Taking attendance. Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Espina Almena. I go by she, her. I'm wearing my curly hair today, and I'm wearing a beige top, and I'm the community engagement coordinator here at Gathering Ground.
Thank you, Maria. Anaya?
Hi, everyone. My name is Anaya. I use she, her pronouns. I'm Gathering Grounds Communications Associate. I'm a Black woman with long, red, curly hair, wearing a black tank top and a gold necklace. And I'm really happy to be here with y'all.
Thank you, Casey, Maria, and Anaya. And Alyssa Prevos is our operations associate who's not here with us today, but I thank her as well. We encourage you to share today's session with anyone and everyone that you think should have been here today, but for one reason or another, so many demands on our time couldn't be here today. Again, the video will be posted on our YouTube channel, and we invite you to share it with your friends, your family, peers, etc. We also, while you're there, ask you to check out some of our other what ifs, which we previously titled briefings. We are so proud of all of the incredible collaborations and partners we have worked with and the topics we've covered, including reparations, consent decision-making, housing justice, birth equity, worker rights, and worker self-directed workplaces, to name a few. While I have you as my captive audience, a couple of shameless plugs. We do meet every first Thursday of the month for a Sipping in Solidarity, which is our virtual community space to simply be together, to connect and be in harmony with one another. It's a beautiful 45 to 1 hour time that we get to be with one another and connect. So I invite all of you, again, it's the first Thursday of the month. This July, it will be the second Thursday because of the holiday. So July 9th, join us. Otherwise, every first Thursday of the month, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, because we have people from all over and we'd love for you to join us. For those of you, and I do see a few of you here who have been with us recently through our decolonization workshop series, we welcome you back. Over the last couple of months, we've explored how systems of power shape our lives, our communities, and even the ways we understand ourselves. One lesson that has surfaced again and again is that decolonization is not simply about understanding history, it's about reimagining relationships, challenging inherited assumptions, and creating new ways of being together. So to check out these and more of our great programming, please stay connected. Sign up for our newsletter. We'll give you all the latest information and how you can join us for future programming. Sipping in Solidarity and the Decolonization Workshop Series are just two examples of the spirit that's also at the heart of today's gathering. So again, thank you for saying yes to this session. Thank you for saying yes to Gathering Ground. And I hope today is everything you want it to be. And with that, I will pass it over to Casey, who will ground us with some group agreements and some acknowledgements.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Maria. Glad to be here with all of you today. So before we continue, I want to start us with some acknowledgements. So wherever you are joining from, we invite you to join us in acknowledging the ground that we stand on. I'm dropping into the chat right now a link to a map that shows you who were the indigenous caretakers of the land that we currently reside on. I myself am from Abenaki and Wabanaki land, colonially known as New Hampshire, and I come from you today from the Lenni Lenape land in New Jersey. We acknowledge the indigenous people who stewarded and cared for these lands long before colonization, and whose descendants actually remain present today, right? We honor their enduring relationship to place and recognize our responsibility to support Indigenous sovereignty, justice, and self-determination. An acknowledgement is the first step, but it cannot be the last. We encourage everyone to consider supporting the work of Indigenous-led organizations, movements, and rematriation efforts through service and donations. We also acknowledge that the communities we inhabit were built through the work of countless people, including enslaved Africans whose stolen labor helped to build this nation, immigrant workers who continue to sustain it, and generations of workers whose struggles for dignity, safety, and economic justice remain unfinished. We recognize that many of these systems of wealth and opportunity were created through exploitation, and that building a more equitable and future requires confronting these realities. And we honor the contributions, leadership, and resilience of transgender, non-binary, gender-expansive people and women whose labor, care, and creativity have too often been marginalized or erased. We affirm the right of all people to live fully and safely as themselves. At Gathering Ground, we believe that these acknowledgements are not endings, they are invitations. Invitations to ask how we show up, what responsibilities we carry, and what actions we are willing to take. And meaningful change begins when we as people come together. We build relationships, we share stories, we challenge assumptions, and imagine new possibilities. So today's What If is an opportunity to do exactly that. Thank you for being here and for your curiosity and experience. I want to do a tiny little bit of level setting and some group agreements for our conversation today. One, this is not a sort of 101 space for trans identity and the ways in which trans people are affected in our communities and excluded or included in different spaces. If you're new to this conversation for the first time, there are some resources that we will gladly share with you afterward. So just to kind of level set, we're not going to go into the basis of what being transgender is and means and all of the ways in which people inhabit it. We're kind of in a 201 session today. In addition to that, we want to make sure that this is a space that embraces intersectionality. So rather than well, what about this population or what about this kind of identity, right? We acknowledge that intersectionality is present, is what we need to address. And so, when we have solved inclusion and access for Black, trans, immigrant, disabled women, we've solved it for a lot of other people as well, right? So with that, I want to shift over just to share my screen briefly with group agreements that Gathering Ground likes to start with. And as I do this, I want to invite you to consider these, right? You don't necessarily need to agree with them. You may take what is useful for you from this and you can leave the rest. But in these spaces, some standard stuff we hear, right? Move back, move forward. If you're somebody who tends to jump in on conversation, maybe pause, allow space for others. If you're somebody who tends to hang back, maybe insert yourself in conversation, ask your question today. That we have a shared responsibility to each other to create the best kind of learning environment we can. Accountability, right? Accountability for Gathering Ground is really about being answerable for actions or harms that we may cause in the process of being in relationship with each other. And even if it's unintentional, if a harm has been caused, to just pause for a minute, accept that a harm has been caused, and then ask what can be done to repair it, right? Also reflecting on your positionality. There's a lot of different messages that the different privileges that we all inhabit, be they of gender or race or class or ability, be they being a US passport holder or an English speaker or any number of other identities, they hold privilege in different spaces in our society. So just reflect on your own positionality within this space. And then, things like expecting a lack of closure, language literacy, and then I'll flip over to the other page here. That we don't have to agree, which I already mentioned, right? We can disagree, but disagree respectfully, disagree with the idea maybe, but make space for different views to be heard. And then there's three others I just want to briefly point out. Being willing to be uncomfortable, right? When we are uncomfortable, that is the growth edge for us, right? And this really dovetails with thinking about paying attention to your body. When you feel that moment of like discomfort, when you're feeling like you want to pull away or step out, try to lean into that as much as possible, right? In addition to that, we always encourage folks to not confuse a sense of discomfort for a lack of safety. Oftentimes when we are in conversation and we start to bump up against that discomfort edge, we bounce out because the discomfort is what makes us leave a conversation. But please do not mistake discomfort for a lack of safety. A lack of safety is very real for some people in different conversations, but not for all of us, particularly those of us that walk in various kinds of privilege. And then lastly, permission to speak in rough draft, right? Sometimes we're wrestling with concepts, trying to articulate them for ourselves for the first time, and that's okay. That's invited in our spaces at Gathering Ground. And permission to speak in rough draft dovetails with accountability, right? If I'm speaking in first draft and I cause harm as a result of that, I will also pause, reflect, acknowledge that harm was caused, and then ask what I can do to repair. And then keep it here, right? Exercise good judgment, share what you learn from this, share the takeaways for you, but please do not attribute any comments to an individual or an organization. We try to treat each other with patience and curiosity and learning. So with that, if there's any that resonate with you particularly from these group agreements, I'd love to see it in the chat. But I'm going to move into introducing our fabulous speaker for today, Nathan Rodriguez. And Nathan, bear with me a second, there we go. Nathan is a transgender man who has been transitioning since 2011. He achieved his BA from Montclair State University with a major in women, gender, and sexuality studies in 2013, and has been working professionally in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space for over a decade. A seasoned public speaker, Nathan has given numerous impactful speeches everywhere from Ivy League schools to the State House in Trenton, and many more. Currently, Nathan is a board member for the LGBT plus resource group of a Fortune 100 company, where he continues to advocate and make an impact on cultural competency in the corporate sphere. Outside of his T plus advocacy work, Nathan is a small business owner running the Dirty Soda pop-up Spooky Dookie that vends dairy-free drinks all over the South Jersey, and is also a published author for several short stories and a novel entitled The Soulmate Project. He's married to his partner, Franny, of 17 years, and together they raise one awesome kid and 3 fur babies. And so without further ado, I am delighted to turn this conversation over to Nathan. Nathan, all yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction and all that wonderful information. I want to say good afternoon to everybody that's here. Thank you so much for having me and for taking the time out of everyone's busy days to come and have some meaningful conversation. And sometimes that means just sitting with the information and mulling it over. And sometimes that means having a discourse about it. I'm here really just to try to be a vessel or a conductor of wherever this conversation goes. To follow in the footsteps of everybody who just spoke, I'm a Puerto Rican trans man. I've got kind of like turquoise hair ish right now, got glasses and a gray shirt and a white undershirt. And firstly, yes, as you know, all of that information that was in the introduction, I'm also um, currently serving as the executive director for Trans Equity Coalition, which was kind of what landed me here before everybody today. For folks who are not familiar with Trans Equity Coalition, we are a New Jersey statewide 501c3 nonprofit that is exclusively facilitated by gender diverse individuals. And our mission is really to improve the quality of life for T plus identified people across the state of New Jersey. I will tell you a little bit more about like all of our programming and some stuff that we have coming up probably towards the end. But I do want to get into just also an acknowledgement of Pride Month. It's June. We love to celebrate Pride Month. Of course, we celebrate all year long. But June is just a really great opportunity for all of us to remember the struggle that came with uh, the work that we're doing around liberating trans and queer identities. Um, it is a celebration. It's also just something to treat with. I don't know if I want to say heaviness, but just maybe respect for really what that struggle looked like and continues to look like in today's sociopolitical landscape that we're navigating more and more each day. As was stated earlier, we're going a little bit beyond just a one-on-one glance over of like what is a pronoun and stuff like that. And just really my hope is to focus on understanding intersectionality and how to apply allyship in the real world and make it actionable. When everybody was chiming in with like what brought you here, a lot of people said allyship and a lot of people said, you know, inclusivity. And I think that those are really important points to keep at the forefront of our minds as we have this conversation. Um, so I want to start us off with kind of like a thinking exercise that I like to do with folks from time to time. I call it the beach exercise. So let's envision for a moment that we've really been wanting to go to the beach. Actually, this is the perfect time of year to think about that. And our friends hit us up and say, oh my gosh, we're all free. Let's have a beach day. Um, it's exciting and it's something that you may be thinking, yes, like finally, I've been trying to plan this beach day. Try to think about like some of what you might start to think about as you're getting ready to meet up with your friends for this beach day. For some people, it's like, did I have enough sunscreen? What time are we all meeting up? Like, who's bringing food or what have you? Um, and then as we start to understand intersectionality, speaking from my own lens as a trans person, we start to get into the thinking syntax that other folks may not immediately have when they're planning this long awaited beach day. So for somebody who's trans, it can bring about a lot of anxiety as we start to think about how's my body going to be observed on this beach day. If I wear beach appropriate attire, in air quotes, um, will I be safe? Are there ways in which I'm being perceived openly as trans without my having to disclose or having the agency to even disclose that I'm trans? We might start to think about things like, is there a safe restroom where I can go on this beach day? Um, and this exercise works with all different kinds of identities. You know, if I'm somebody with a physical disability, is this beach even accessible to me? Can I physically actually get to the beach? So as we start to understand, you know, why intersectionality is important and how it works, I find that that's like a really good exercise to just start to understand the mentality. um, if you're somebody who doesn't have to worry about all these things, that's great. It doesn't mean you have to feel guilty, doesn't mean you're bad, but it does mean um, it would really behoove you to start to be intentional about the ways that we think and interact with the world around us and with the people around us. Doing certain exercises, doing certain activities, don't come freely to everybody. And myself as a trans person, um, it, I didn't do anything wrong, but I am inevitably going to have to pay consequences for doing things that other people get to do freely. And that's really what I want people to keep in mind when we're talking about intersectionality. So it's really important to remember that transphobia doesn't exist in a vacuum. The really important thing that I wanted to hone in on is that transphobia is rooted in the same systems that oppress other people. It is rooted in the systems that oppress women and people of color and people with disabilities. Um, and that is really what makes an intersectional approach so important. Trans people, rough estimates, depending what study you look at, make up about, let's say, 1 to 3% of the population. And a lot of times when we're doing educational events through TEC or doing advocacy work, a lot of people start to wonder, well, why is there so much discussion and why do there have to be so many allowances and changes made for such a small demographic of people? Again, we're talking about 1 to 3% of the population. Why are we making laws that say yay or nay about such a small group of people? Or why are they demanding so much space at the table? Why is there so much discussion? Um, and it's important to understand that, number one, of course, even if it's one person, it's important, right? We are all human beings. We're all citizens of this world. And we want to advocate for one another and make sure that folks are heard and safe and respected. But it is also really important to understand that because all of this is really one house of cards, it's not going to start and stop with just trans people. These are laws and events and ideas and propaganda that can and do bleed out into other demographics of people. So we go from thinking about 1 to 3% of a population to understanding how this can and will affect all of us. The more that we compound marginalized identities, the more vulnerable people with those compounded marginalized identities become. So it's in that lens, it's really not a coincidence that trans women of color, specifically Black trans women, are the most disproportionately targeted in our community. We're talking anything from homicides to police profiling and police violence, sex crimes, and so much more. A recent study from Human Rights Campaign actually estimate that trans women of color make up about 85% of all reported fatal violence victims in the LGBTQ plus community. And that's really important. It's really, so when we're talking about compounding marginalized identities and intersectionality, we start to understand that, for using the example of Black trans women, again, we are compounding these marginalized identities. It's difficult enough to be a trans person in this world. And then when you're already at a risk for being disproportionately targeted by groups like police forces or hate groups, that matters. It matters being Black and trans. It matters being disabled and trans, because now you're losing so much more access to all of the other avenues that other people may be able to explore freely, whether it's job opportunities or just the ability to exist safely in your own body. Just want everybody to keep that in mind and to really understand the gravity of what that means, because it's not a failure of the system. This is how systems are designed. When we spend time, particularly politically, as we're seeing more and more today, pitting people against a quote unquote bad guy or a boogeyman. Um, we're taking away from people's ability or even their desire to disrupt systems and to really take a closer look at the people that are in power. If you tell people this trans boogeyman is coming after your sports teams or your children in locker rooms, um, and if you don't agree with us, then you must not care about your children or you must not care about women's sports. It's easy for people to really become laser focused on one small marginalized group instead of stepping back and taking a look at really what is going on and why we're so worried about such a small group of people having equal rights, instead of worrying about the larger picture, so to speak. So the trans witch hunt is really not only hurting trans people, but also taking away rights from other folks. And that's really what I'm talking about when I talk about intersectionality and why it is relevant and why it's important to everybody. You don't have to know a trans person. You don't have to be a trans person in order for this to be relevant because this affects everybody. So case in point, some of what I was talking about, looking at sports outrage, for example. This has been a really hot button topic for folks in the news. Politically, it gets clicks on articles. They really love to sensationalize of all the stuff that's happening with this, supposed trans people coming for sports. And when you really just focus on those sensationalized news articles, it can seem like a really scary thing. And even well meaning trans allies and people that I know in the trans community get really wrapped up in that of like, well, that really is unfair. How come if you're, you have a larger frame or you have more muscular, what's the word I'm looking for? Composition in your body. Why should you be allowed to compete along with cisgender women athletes? Really what is there to understand? Well, first of all, is that nothing has, as of yet, ever been proven of having some type of physical disadvantage or advantage with trans athletes, number one. Number two, trans athletes make up a minuscule percentage of athletes, even more microscopic when we look at athletes that actually make it to the professional level. You're not seeing this wave of trans athletes that are breaking records and winning medals, and it doesn't exist. But again, we're looking at things that are sensationalized and here to cause panic. We're not looking at things that are actually factual or the more insidious point of what that means. So as we start talking about, bathroom boogeymen and sports outrage, where this is leading us is the obligation for people to prove gender, which is an astronomically dangerous and slippery slope to follow, especially when we are looking through the guise of what most people would consider as, well, where we're trying to protect women and we're trying to protect the integrity of women's sports. But I mean, we really just have to ask ourselves how things like physical inspections, and we're talking about physical genital inspections in locker rooms, in bathrooms. This can be for adults or children. How is that protecting the integrity of women? We also have to ask ourselves why the debate wraps around only trans athletes when we talk about preserving women's sports. Because these same people who are adamant that trans people should not compete because of the integrity of women's sports, number one, have probably never sat down and watched women's sports in their life. They're not asking why female athletes are so underpaid. They're not asking why there are so few opportunities for female athletes. They're not asking why women's sports are not broadcast on mainstream TV, why women's sports teams don't have stadiums, or they don't have their own allocated places to compete, why the rules are of sports and what is considered athletic are based around qualities that we associate with cisgender men. How strong are you? How fast are you? um, but if we frame sports through the lens of qualities that we see around, or that we socially associate with cisgender women, like how flexible are you, how well balanced are you, how precise are you, um, we start to see that the sports thing is quite a bit skewed. So that's not to spend too much time talking about athletics, but to understand that when we are not looking at things through an intersectional approach, or understanding the ways in which all of these systems of oppression relate to one another, it's easy to look at, well, why am I going to stick my neck out for this little 1 to 3% of people? I don't even know anybody who's trans. I've never even met a trans person, or things that people kind of tell themselves in their mind, and really not understanding how much more insidious this is. And that can be around anything. It could be around, talking about gender, as we were just talking about with the guise of protecting women, or it could be about people of color, it could be about immigration, it could be about ability, and so many more things. Because again, all of these systems play off of one another. It doesn't exist in a bathroom, in a vacuum, excuse me. So looking at that same argument through the lens of people of color, if as a trans person I'm already susceptible to being unemployed or underemployed, um, a wide amount of trans people are either fired or let go from jobs shortly after coming out. We already face the risk of coming out and being excommunicated from support systems like our immediate family. We start running the risk of not having access to housing because we don't have support systems in place. And we're cross-referencing that with statistics that we see around people of color. People with names that are traditionally associated with either immigrants or people of color are already disproportionately unemployed and underemployed. They can apply with the same credentials or resumes and statistically get fewer callbacks, get fewer interviews. If they do have employment, they get fewer opportunities to advance. So again, we're seeing that these things have a correlation. We already see multiple groups that are disproportionately unemployed or underemployed, not through lack of skills, but through lack of belief or lack of opportunity. And when we start to understand that these things all interact with each other, we can really start to understand the ways that we can look at issues or topics through an intersectional lens of this isn't just about a trans identity. This is about so much more. And whether I'm an employer or a coworker or a family member, these are ways that I really want people to start to see the world through these different lenses. And if you've already seen something through one lens, I know a lot of people on this call today already do some form of community work. So if you are working with migrant families, start to ask yourself, okay, well, how does gender play into this? If you're somebody who works with, people across a gender spectrum, okay, well, have I been able to address this in a way that folks with disabilities can access, or folks to whom English is not their first language, or whatever other demographics we feel we have not maybe invited to that table that day? We also have to ask ourselves, who gets punished when gender is not performed correctly? So looking at cases like somebody like Imani Khalif, who was that Olympic boxer, who was a cisgender woman but was accused of being trans, and it it was an uproar. It was just this massive scandal of you look too masculine, you're too muscular, you're too good, you cannot possibly be a female athlete. Or somebody like Alok Vedmanan also, who is, just somebody who is very visibly queer and who really relishes in their ability to express their gender and can be seen very often as, too masculine and too feminine at the same time. And what does that punishment look like? When we are not behaving in the ways that patriarchy or binary gender systems mandate that we behave or dress or enact, um, what does that punishment look like? Because, it can go from something as seemingly benign as somebody made a negative comment about the outfit that I was wearing, but then we have so much violence and hate crimes in our community. We just had the murder of Juniper Blessing that just occurred. And so when folks are not quote unquote performing gender correctly, um, in our community, the consequences are very dire. This isn't something that is just trans people are making noise just to make noise, or we're just want to be loud and want to be seen. When we come to doing talks, even such as this, um, understand that this is a risk to our physical safety and that there are real threats among us. Although I've always been a very vocal, very out, very proud trans person, which I continue to be, um, in the current socio-political landscape that we navigate. I've had to do a lot of pivoting and reassessing in the spaces in which I am allowed to be visibly myself, um, because of threats of violence or incidents of violence that I've faced. And additionally, for my family, my family didn't ask to be out, and it's just we're here together, and although they love and care for me and are proud of me, um, I have to be very careful in understanding that the people who don't want us speaking up, um, can be a threat not only to myself but to my family. And that is something that trans people we have to live with every day. So as we start to frame allyship and understanding, these are some of the things that I just want folks to really start to conceptualize and understand that these are real world scenarios with real consequences. So now that we've talked a little bit about intersectionality and some of what that means and how um, it looks, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about allyship. I think that's why a lot of people are here, and I think that now more than ever is critical for us to have allies. The least of which reason being what I was just explaining, that every time I put myself out as a trans person, I'm taking an informed risk, and this is really the time for allies to show up and fight for our community. So first and foremost, it's really important for us to understand and remember that allyship, number one, is not about being polite, and it's not about being friendly or agreeable or saying I accept these people or I don't have any problem with trans people. Um, that is not what allyship is, contrary to some popular belief. And really importantly, is that the title of ally is not something that you give yourself, full stop. You cannot just say, I'm an ally. This is something that is given to you by the members of the community. It's not about what you think or what you feel or what you like or your ideas. Being an ally is 100% around what you do. So, using just an example that I see very often is somebody who says, "Oh my gosh, I love the queer community. Think you guys are awesome and fabulous, but I don't necessarily care that my boyfriend is like a gay basher. That's just him. That's just how he is." And that is not allyship. That is far from allyship. Allyship needs to hold ourselves accountable. Um, it is an exercise that we do every day. These are intentional choices that we make as we go about our daily lives. If you would like to consider yourself an ally and you think, yeah, I feel like I'm a pretty good ally, it's important to sit back and think, okay, well, what have I done? Um, and what am I continuing to do as an ally of this community, other than just saying, "Oh man, I hope those trans people get their rights soon." I hope nothing bad happens to you on the way home. That's great, but it's really about asking yourselves, like, what systems create exclusion, and what power do I have to interrupt those systems? Once you start sitting with those type of questions, now you are starting to get into the space of real allyship. So, talking a little bit about allyship is what we do. You can still fall into performative allyship, even if you are quote unquote doing things. If you are hanging that rainbow flag up and you're like, yeah, I'm going to go to the pride parade. Yes, those are important things to do. Those are action items. But really, those are in that realm of, am I executing performative allyship? Am I doing it when it's convenient for me? Am I doing it only in the month of June? Only when I'm surrounded by other queer people. Okay, everybody else was flying a rainbow flag and I also flew one, and then put mine away, discreetly. Meaningful allyship is really where we want and need people to be. And there's so many ways that can look. And I really want people to know that um, I'm not here to intimidate people or tell you you need to like throw yourself over the railroad tracks in order to be an ally. I talk to people all the time within the trans community and without the trans community that the ways in which we show up look different for everybody, and that it is also important to view it through the lens of, what am I capable of doing? That can be from whether I have a disability, or whether I'm putting myself in physical danger, or an array of different things. We can start with some small examples of allyship. Number one, and I can't stress this enough, is learning about trans issues in your spare time. Keyword being in your spare time. Is it important to sit down and talk with trans people? Is it important to have open dialogues and ask questions? Absolutely. But it's really important for allies to understand that we are really maxed out. And this is true now more than ever. We exist in a space where, and speaking from my own experience, I have to budget how much time I look at my phone, what social media platforms I expose myself to, where I go physically. Do I even bother watching the news? Because this is not a theoretical conversation where people can play devil's advocate, and this is my actual life. So learning about it in your spare time takes the onus off of myself as your trusty handy dandy trans friend or family member to say, oh, I'm going to just text Nate and ask, is it true that there's all these trans people going in the bathrooms and like trying to grab kids? Or what do you think about the latest thing that our president has said? Or have you heard about this trans person? Like, it's really exhausting. As an ally, you really need to take the time to say, I don't know enough about this. Let me do a little bit of soul searching, a little bit of studying from reputable sources. I'll also stress that, not just something that you're seeing on Facebook or TikTok or whatever, but looking at actual reputable sources and learning about the content. And then maybe coming to the table with some questions of, hey, I've learned about this and this and this, and I had no idea that this was the case. And because I learned about this, it made me think about you, and I wanted to ask you, how are you doing today? That is how we start to have informed allyship. Not just, you know, hey, what does this surgery look like? Is it true that this, it's really important to keep that frame of mind. Small acts of allyship can also look like being somebody's bathroom buddy. Um, I can't tell you enough how scary it is to just go to a bathroom. And now, myself as a trans person who's been out and physically transitioning since 2011, um, when I'm walking down the street, I don't get misgendered. I'm a cis passing person, which is, comes with its own privileges. Um, but last year, I was still attacked in a public restroom. Um, whether it was because of my identity, I was leaving a queer event on that day, and that's always in the back of my mind of like, did they see me leaving this event? Did they follow me to the bathroom? Was this the reason why this happened to me? But regardless of the reasons, the fact of the matter is that it is unsafe for us to go out in public and exist in certain spaces. If you know a trans person or have somebody who's transitioning in your life, offer to be that person of like, oh, you want to go try on some jeans? I'll wait outside the dressing room. I'll make sure that everything is okay. Um, Volunteer some time with a nonprofit, like Trans Equity Coalition, for example, or learn how to leverage what privileges you do have. These are all little easy ways for allies to really start to put their allyship in action. And as we kind of grow up in our like little ally academy and go beyond, okay, well, I've learned the pronouns and I've studied in my spare time and I put some volunteer hours and got involved. Um, it's still important to continue to grow our allyship skills. This can look like recommending trans people for job opportunities, bringing us in to speak in spaces like we are right now with Gathering Ground. Inviting trans people to your tables is monumentally important. And in fact, I may even say more important than you coming to our spaces to say, oh, I'm going to have a seat at this table and we're going to have this dialogue. Not to say don't do those things, but yes, as somebody just said in the chat, and I was absolutely just about to go there too. Paid speaking opportunities. It is paramount, particularly for reasons that I was just discussing before. This goes beyond you getting my lived experience and my expertise as a public speaker. I really have to make that informed decision of when or if any speaking engagement that I do goes public, I am now facing potential backlash and potential acts of violence. And so I feel that the least that we can do is pay trans people for being able to come and speak publicly, because it is a risk. I also urge people to challenge misinformation and transphobia in real time. Yes, even with your friends and family, even with grandma at Thanksgiving, it needs to happen in real time. People do not change behavior by, oh, one time this thing had happened, you said something and offended me, and they're, well, when was that? Well, I never said that. I don't remember saying that at all. Well, I don't think that way. Are you saying that I'm a racist? Are you saying that like, you know, um, and granted, I'm not saying don't have that conversation, but it is paramount to understand that as these things happen, somebody makes that transphobic comment, somebody says, oh, I heard on such and such news channel that this, it is really important to say, let's pause here and have a little bit of a learning moment, because what you're perpetuating is not only untrue, but it's harmful and dangerous. And this is the cost. This is, the cost is the lives of trans people. Hate crimes do not start with hate crimes. They start with a joke that was never corrected, a behavior that was never corrected, um, misinformation that grows in Reddit threads and just, other people creating this echo chamber of misinformation. Um, Allies play a monumental role of correcting misinformation and correcting hateful speech, damaging speech, harmful behavior, and so on and so forth. And then as we grow to larger and larger scales of allyship and how we apply them in the real world, work on dismantling the systems that create transphobia. So backtracking a little bit to what I was talking about how things look different for different people. Some people can physically show up to protests. If you can, do it. It is extremely important. However, understand that there are people who cannot. There are people for whom showing up at a protest is a physical risk to their safety, and that's okay. Nobody is saying, you if you're not there, you're not real. There are ways to write letters to legislators and lawmakers, start phone chains, donate money to organizations that are doing the work. There is so much that people can do, and not one person can do it all, but like everybody has a responsibility to do one piece of that puzzle. So as we're winding down here on me taking up lots and lots of your time, I just want people to remember that real allyship very rarely takes place in the rooms where trans people occupy. Let's remember to step out of that comfort box of being performative and doing the real work. How are you advocating for me when I am not in the room? That is what is really going to lead folks towards actionable allyship that really counts and makes a difference in our community. And I understand that I hold myself to that same accountability because, again, yes, I'm trans. Yes, I'm out. Yes, I talk about being trans all the time. People are probably somewhat tired of me talking about being trans. But when I'm in a room where people do not know that I'm trans, I continue to advocate for trans people. I don't have to necessarily say what you said was wrong because, hey, I'm trans and I was offended by that. Because that's not the point. Because people will performatively correct themselves when they think, oh, you're the one that I've offended. Oh, no, I was just kidding. I was just, when I correct people about transphobia, I don't tell them that I'm trans. I let them think this is a cisgender guy who stepped up to me and said, dude, that was not cool. You need to correct what you were just saying. What you just said was false and damaging. Because again, it's not about, hey, I'm a trans person in the room, you've offended me. It's about we are all in this together. And whether you assume my gender or not is irrelevant to the conversation. Again, it's not about me. It's about correcting behaviors that can and do become damaging to our community. So just remember that you do not have to be a trans organization to serve trans people well. All you need to do is recognize that trans people are already a part of the population that you serve. And all you have to do is really just take that extra moment to look at, am I thinking intersectionally? Am I creating intersectional opportunities? And am I executing meaningful and true allyship? And you're already almost all the way there. So that is what I have prepared for y'all for today. I didn't want to take up a ton of time. I probably took up a little bit more time than I anticipated, but I I do want to hand it over to the folks at Gathering Ground to see how y'all want to handle discussion questions and the like.
Great. Thank you, Nathan. Let's see some love in the reactions and in the chat for Jason and everything that he has shared with us this afternoon. Thank you, Nathan, for being willing to be in conversation with all of us so that we can become, better partners in the work, better collaborators, and hopefully win that title of ally someday, right? So folks, here's how we're going to run kind of Q&A. As a reminder, because this is being recorded, if you want to come off mute and ask a question into the group, you are welcome to do so. That will be part of the recording that gets posted on YouTube. If not, you can put a question into the chat and the Gathering Ground team will read that out. And then, we've got about half an hour left on our call today. So as we get a little bit closer to the end of our time together, one of the other things that we can do is pause the recording and stop the recording and then have a conversation off camera, which we are also happy to do because we recognize not everybody's comfortable being visible, but that the vocal conversation can be very helpful. So what we'll do is if you have a question you want to ask into the group right now, go ahead and use the raise your hand function. And then I will ask you to unmute yourself and then you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Because we have so many people, we're doing things slightly differently today than we do in other places. So if anybody's got a question, go ahead and use the raise your hand function. And if anybody else has a question for Nathan that you want to drop in the chat, please do so. And we'll start looking at this. I will say, Jason, there's been a lot of good chatter in the chat talking about, sort of plus oneing a lot of the things that you've already said. And folks are saying thanks for a clear and concrete definition of what allyship actually means, right? That's been super helpful. Some folks have brought up the history of the ways in which we have seen today, the kind of anti-trans behavior that we've seen in colonial structures in the past, in histories and in sodomy laws that used to take place here and in other places in the world, right? So there's a long legacy of this kind of oppression and intimidation. So the other thing I will ask folks while we're waiting for people to formulate their thoughts is if you would like to have us end the recording, put a 1 in the chat. And if we have a bunch of those, then we'll just go ahead and move forward with that. So if you want to have a conversation, but we'll end the recording, go ahead and put a 1 into the chat. And thanks, I know a couple of you are jumping off right now. But one of the questions that I have, Nathan, for you while folks are warming up is, where are places that the folks in this room, right, can pay attention to what is moving sort of through the policy lens, through either local states or local municipalities, even at the federal level? I know, for example, there's an attempt to roll back housing protections for LGBTQ people at the federal HUD level right now. So where would you suggest folks go for that reliable information to find out what's happening, what's affecting the trans communities, knowing that we've got an audience from across the United States and Canada and some other places today?
I definitely love checking in with Human Rights Campaign. Their website is really informative with showing and mapping out the scale of anti-trans legislation that is occurring both on the state level and the federal level. It shows you everything, and it also categorizes what types of legislation. Is it around healthcare? Is it around housing? Is it around book bans and education, things like that? They just do a really comprehensive map of what is going on, what state it's in, what has passed, what is only being proposed. And it really, by breaking it down in such a way, I find that it helps with, okay, well, if this is at the level where it's being heard on the floor, this specific bill, that means there's still time. I can still, see how I can get involved. Or, okay, this has already been passed. What is the backlash of this? How can I help the people whom this has affected? So I definitely, I would start there. That's where I go for a lot of mapping out, okay, how many laws are we at today? And it can be a little scary, full warning, but it is a great way for folks to stay informed.
Great. Thank you. And forgive me, Nathan, I think I might have said Jason because one of our colleagues who just had to leave is named Jason. So I apologize if I called you Jason. And thanks to my team for actually calling me out on that, right? It's like, this is what we got to do for each other. Be like, hey, you said something that was a little wrong there. Can we reverse and fix that, right? So Nathan, thank you for that. Any questions for Nathan that folks might have, either in the chat or if you want to come off mute?
If you like, also while we wait, I can talk a little bit about some stuff that we've got coming up, just to give people an idea of what Trans Equity Coalition is doing. And number one, I definitely would love for folks to visit transequitycoalition.org. There you're going to be able to see so much of what we do. Particularly our direct aid program is really monumental. We provide financial aid to trans people in need across the state of New Jersey. And the only way that we can do that is by folks being willing to give. So that helps us get groceries for people, helps them be able to afford their medications or put gas in their car. Um, we are also working on some projects that we hope will lead to us being able to provide transitional housing for displaced trans people. So if you want to get together with us, please visit that website. And also know that this Sunday we are going to be having our second annual Trans Joy Picnic. All of the information for that is going to be listed on our website, but it is free and everybody's welcome. It's a really great opportunity for folks to get together, hold space, build community, and also learn how to get involved with an organization like Trans Equity Coalition.
Oh,
That's great. We do have some questions in the chat. One, what is your favorite trans issue focused content creator or just trans content creators to support? And two, what's your favorite dirty soda?
Oh man, that's really tough. Not because like like yes, there are so many great trans content creators, but I'm also just like secretly like 90 years old, and I'm not the greatest with like content creators. I will say I really love Aaron in the Morning. I feel like I always get really good information in a way that does not make me feel like the world on fire. What's the point? I feel like Aaron in the Morning is really good at just being like, hey, this is happening. Did you hear about it? Good, bad, or indifferent? It just that little nugget of news that I'm like, okay, I can digest that. And then what's my favorite dirty soda? I mean, of course, everything on our menu is the greatest. I'll say, but um, my favorite flavor that we offer is called Ectoplasm, and it is a blue raspberry Mountain Dew with a vanilla vegan cold foam, and it is absolutely out of this world. And I don't even like Mountain Dew, but I love this one. So it goes to show how good it is.
Beautiful. Thanks, Nathan. So we do have a couple of hands up. So Chris, let me go ahead and ask to unmute you, and then you can say yes, unmute, and go for it.
Okay, so I'm still like cooking here, so I don't have like a really fleshed out thing. But my question is like, how do we push organizations not to drop trans advocacy the second that society says we're not worth the trouble? Including cis queer organizations like HRC has done it several times where they're like, actually, trans folks, you're on your own. We're going to do marriage equality, or, they're not including trans like organizations that donate to anti-trans politicians in their ratings. And so like I think these organizations keep dropping us. How do we push the organizations not to drop us and to like consider us in their advocacy?
That's a really great question, and I really love that you brought that up because it's kind of like what I was talking about earlier with like how expertly people in power pit us against each other, right? Um, when it comes to organizations that are taking these type of actions, it doesn't mean that it's not damaging or that it's not harmful, because it absolutely is, and it's heartbreaking and it's really disheartening. I also understand where it comes from, that fear of, we only have but this slice of the pie of funding, and do we, where do I risk losing the 90% of what we're doing to try to save the 10% of what we do? I think I like to believe that that's where a lot of this comes from, and we see it also not only with nonprofits, but um, with medical providers that are refusing to see trans patients or trans children and stuff like that, because, well, we're going to lose our funding. And then who can we help if we're completely defunded? Can we help anybody? It doesn't make it right, and I don't think that that's the right move. I would not encourage organizations to make that move, but I think that from my perspective, um, I would come at it from two different ways. One of being, we need to get this issue in front of as many eyes as possible, and help folks understanding that this is happening, and get everybody together to push back against what we're seeing. Um, we need to reach out to organizations like this. We need to continue to make that noise until they're willing to listen to us. And also, I think, really doing everything that we can to stop this onslaught of defunding, because that is where the the issue, from what I've observed, is really coming from. These doctors don't want to stop treating patients, or these, community organizers don't want to stop helping people. But there is a real fear mongering that's happening of, if you do not do this, you're going to lose everything. And I think that focusing the fight around how can we continue to push back against this anti-trans legislation, which, is, I know, very much easier said than done, because it's coming from the highest office. But I do think that, because that is where the root of the problem seems to be coming from, that's kind of how my brain kind of conceptualizes a way that we can fight back. But I'm with you on that boat, because I think it, to say the least, it doesn't feel good, when we see that happening. So yeah.
Thanks for that, Nathan. And this is really what we're talking about in terms of solidarity, right? This is what it means to show up and do when it matters. It's to say, well, I'm not going to agree to this unless I get to bring along the folks that are being cut out of this conversation, right? I'm not going to, you're not going to get access to my room. You're not going to get access to my vote. You're not going to get access to whatever, unless, trans people are centered in this work too, right? So I see Joanna's got a hand up. So Joanna, I'm going to ask you to unmute, and then you can go ahead. Hang on, I got to ask you to unmute first, and then you got to say yes, and then we've got another comment after that. Oh, got a lot of background noise, Joanna. So if you can make it quick.
Sorry. Please forgive me. I'm at Hard Rock. I'm between jurisdictions. My question was, who makes law? As you spoke so eloquently about allyship, if the court makes law but is not an ally, if the federal government makes law but is not an ally, someone is making the laws for the transgender community. Who does that? Who makes the law? What is the test case that comes before the court, before the Congress, before Senate? No man shall. I say, no man who doesn't know certainly shall. No man who doesn't have a horse in the race shall. Who makes good law? And that's my question. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Joanna. Appreciate that. So for folks who couldn't necessarily hear the question, Joanna's saying, who's making the laws, right? And where are trans people in the process of making those laws? Are they, right? We know most of the time, right? The trans experience is not there in the formulation of the laws. So, Nathan, I don't know if you want to say anything in response to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a deeply concerning and highly relevant question that we have to continue to ask because um there, and I'm going to preface this by saying that there's certain things that I want to comment on, but as a 501c3, I can't talk about certain candidates or um, certain people in certain offices and such. So it's, but what I guess the way that I'll try to comment on it is that there are a massive amount of people across all branches of government that claim to be allies who are not. Um, and we, I just even just speaking as an individual, I am constantly being offered such and such representative wants to have a discussion with the trans community, and voices are going to be heard. Um, they are often scheduled a day, if not hours, before they're supposed to occur. And say, well, you're either going to show up and or not be there, and say, well, we offered you a chance to be there, but we have no notice. Um, when we are able to show up, times are cut short. Certain folks are offered a chance to speak. Certain folks are not allowed a chance to speak. Um, it's everywhere. It is everywhere in the fabric of our government. Um, without overstepping or saying anything that could put my own organization in danger, I will just say I'm a huge fan of disrupting systems. And I think that this is a, a system wide issue. There are very few, if any, um, lawmakers, decision makers, legislators, what have you, that I trust making decisions about trans lives. Um, it's just not there. I have yet to really see, like, wow, I felt fully represented in that discussion or that room. I wish there was a good answer to say, hey, these are the people that we need to be listening to, but the people that we need to be listening to are simply not in power. Um, and I think we can change that. And I think that we should fight to change that. But until such time, we are unfortunately continuing to swim upstream a little bit. And hopefully one day that won't be the case.
Yep. Thanks for that, Nathan.
Yeah.
So pivoting to a slightly different question that came through the chat, which is more about the personal level and around like appropriate allyship and what that can look like. So the question is, what are your thoughts on a white cis ally using they them pronouns as a way to call attention to how gendered pronouns are part of colonized language? Do you think that's perfect? Do you think that's not?
I think that if they don't identify with they them pronouns, then they shouldn't use they them pronouns. I think there are ways to call attention to it without, um, I guess, for lack of a better term, falsely representing yourself. Um, I can call attention to black issues without like putting on blackface and saying like, would you still respect me if I look like this? And it's like, but you don't look like that. There are people who identify with they them pronouns who you can give the platform to say, let's talk about this. I would discourage somebody from saying, well, I'm going to use they them pronouns as a means to like kind of have a social disruption moment or something like that, because the stakes are low for you. That's not, you don't face ramification of what it means to have they them pronouns, or to identify with, a non-binary or fluid or, etc. identity. So yeah, I would say let's not do that. Let's rather, if you want to talk about shining a light on folks, with they them pronouns and like talking about that issue, let's talk to the people who actually fall under that identity and let them say what they have to say.
Great. Thanks, Nathan. Any other questions that folks want to drop into the chat or want to raise their hands for? The person who proposed that question says, thanks, that was very helpful. By the way, yeah, Maria, go for it.
Thank you, Case. I wanted to give an opportunity for folks to ask the question. Um, and if you'll permit me, I'll jump in. I have this question for you, Nathan, because I mentioned at the beginning that we renamed our briefings to "What If," because we invite answers, right? We want to invite people to think of creative solutions, and so I'm going to ask you if we answer the question that we asked in the title of today's session, what if our trans siblings were fully included and protected in all spaces? I'd love to hear from you. What would be different in our workplaces, in our schools, in our communities, just to kind of, let us imagine big.
I love that question. I think that what scares, and this is just my perspective, what I believe that part of what scares so many people about the trans community is the way that we have redefined and broken the barriers that are around us. I think that scares a lot of people to know that this was an option the whole time to say, I reject these parameters and I'm going to exist on my own terms. And all of the vibrant, different, unique, colorful ways that can look. I think that if I were to imagine a society where trans liberation has been achieved and where we're just fully, not even just included, but like revered and upheld, I think we are going to start to see a world where a lot more boundaries fall away because we're at that point realizing that binaries don't exist, that rules are in desperate need of redefinition, and that the world is so much bigger than we've given it credit for. It's kind of like when you let a dog off the leash for the first time, and they're like, wow, I'm fast. I didn't know I could run this fast. I didn't know I could go that far. I didn't know that there was this world outside of like walls and fences and cages and stuff like that. And you really just like let them unleash and you're going to be like, man, I didn't know that dog was that fast, and I didn't know that dog could run for as long as that dog could run. I think that that's the way I envision the world, where we just completely eradicate these preconceived notions of what is male or female or how we enact gender, and it's just going to bleed into so many other respects. How can we show up for one another? How can we express ourselves? What types of labor do we value? What types of things do we learn in school? It's in all things. It's in all facets. It's really just being trans is an acknowledgement that the boundaries don't really exist. We just kind of exist within them, and we can go so much farther than we think.
Well, that feels like a mic drop, if anything ever felt like a mic drop.
Yeah.
Yeah, just lots of love to that response. We've got just about 7 or 8 minutes in our time together today. We are going to take just a couple of minutes to pop into the chat for all of you feedback form. So please do fill that out while we're sort of wrapping up any other questions that are coming up for folks. It really matters to Gathering Ground. We literally look at the responses. We adjust in real time based on what people are saying is working for them and what's not. And it's also just really helpful for Nathan too, to know like what's working, what landed, in these conversations today. So I've just dropped that into the chat, and I'm going to quickly scan through the chat here to see if there were any other questions. I see Chris has a comment, infinite diversity and infinite combinations. Come on, Star Trek future. Yes, totally with you. For those of you who are Trek fans. And then a comment from another person talking about, exploring gender and existing in privilege and knowing how to be able to, or not knowing, but trying to be able to understand that identity can be fluid, right? That we don't actually live in this binary that we've been told we live in. So just any last questions, any last thoughts for Nathan? We're getting some love in the chat for that as well. Thank you for that. And a comment from the chat, older generations constructed our gender identity in a restrictive binary. It wasn't fun. I'm wondering if these generations see the current opportunity to reevaluate our own identity as scary since it was hard won.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also important to point out, like, older generations, yes, but importantly, colonized identities, colonized rules. That was not the case, going back even to ancient times. It's chronologic, yes, but colonial, absolutely. There were so many more indigenous populations to whom trans people were advisors, spiritual leaders, caretakers, community organizers, and all of these wonderful things. So it is that's a big piece of the puzzle is working on the decolonization. But also, to your other point, yeah, I hope that older generations that we interact with in our living contemporary world can start to deconstruct some of those rigid norms that they've learned. I never use age as an excuse. Like, oh, he's old school. He's from a different time. I'm like, what do you mean? You've been doing life for 75 years and you didn't learn? That's what I took that as. Because the longer you do something, the better you should get at it, not the worse you should get at it. So if you've been here for a long time, maybe reevaluate. How did I not grow from this? How did I not take away some new life skills from that? So we can all be accountable. Even my 85-year-old grandma at the time when I came out was like, okay, so Nathan, I get it. She can do it. I think a lot of people can do it.
Yeah, thanks for that. Right. We don't need to be ageist either, right? Like, why do we assume that we are able to grow and learn differently and others aren't, right? That's
100%
on our part. So just one last comment from the chat. Imagine if all the labor put into enforcing binaries were put into care work instead, right? That's a what if scenario, right? All right, folks. Yeah, Maria, go ahead.
Just a few, I want to just kind of make a few comments because I think it just, just to show my solidarity to Nathan. I mentioned in the beginning that we have different what ifs briefing sessions available for you on your YouTube channel. And the reason I mentioned all the different topics was because, at Gathering Ground, we see all of these as connected with one another. And Nathan mentioned, I met Nathan on a panel with climate justice folks, immigrant justice folks, worker rights, people that were advocating for workers' rights. And I remember hearing from Nathan say, like, you can't solve one without solving the other, right? And so you just mentioned trans liberation. Trans liberation leads to collective liberation. And that is our ultimate North Star. So can't solve one problem if you don't solve the others because they're all interconnected. And so just want a reminder of that and just gratitude to all of you for being here with us. We hope that if this is the first time you're joining, that you come again. Immense gratitude to you, Nathan, for just being the amazing person you are, and for enlightening us all with ways that we can learn and continue to grow in our allyship. So thank you again. I want to thank Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Stone Foundation of New Jersey, and the Glennon Foundation for making this free and accessible. Share it with your friends. So many of us, and we have another partner that we work with that talks about allyship in terms of like anti-racism and anti-oppression. And there's no end in sight. This is a continuous journey. So there's a lot of work for all of us to continue to do. So thank you all, and just immense gratitude to you all. Casey, any final thoughts?
Nope, I think we're good. We're going to send you on to the rest of your day. Go forth, be well. See you next time.
Take
Thank you,
care.
everyone.